Now we're going to read from the next page. If you turn the page, it looks like this, and if you open it up, it looks like this. So I'm going to read this to you, and then you can answer the questions in the talk box at the bottom of page 3. You can answer those online and submit the answers to me at the end of all the videos. This story is called The Bully. Follow along with me. Ted McCauley was a jerk, a big guy with something nasty to say about everyone. Ted didn't really care who you were, what you looked like, or the clothes you wore. He would always find something to make fun of. He made fun of me because I was short. He made fun of my friends because they listened to punk rock. No one ever did anything about Ted, though, because he was so big. He'd never beaten anyone up, but he looked like the kind of guy that could or would at any minute. He would be laughing at you one minute, then get this crazy look in his eyes the next. The thing was, he never got in trouble. Ted was sneaky with his bullying and was good at it. Everyone figured he was like a volcano, best left undisturbed for the sake of the quiet village at its foot. But as with all volcanoes, there will always be an explosion. And there was an explosion last spring that no one saw coming. Mrs. Harvey thought it would be fun for us to have show and tell for history class. The idea was to bring in something from our ancestors and to talk about our heritage. "What are you bringing?" I groaned to my buddy Mito after class. "We have an old violin that's been in our family for generations," said Mito, slapping his locker shut. "I hope my mom lets me bring it." "She'll probably freak out," I laughed. "You're right," he smirked back. "She'll make me wear a turtleneck sweater my grandma made me last Christmas instead. The one with the big polar bear on it." I laughed even harder. "Forget the violin. I'll get a shot of that." "What are you maggots talking about?" Ted chimed in. "Nothing," muttered Mito. "Don't you have an animal to torture somewhere?" Mito had a hard time not saying anything. He was tall as Ted, but not as big. "What?" hissed Ted. Mito could see that look in Ted's eyes. "Nothing," I said. "Nothing." "That's right, nothing." Ted finished the conversation for us. "You gonna eat those chips?" he asked, taking them out of my locker. After Ted lumbered off, chips in hand, Mito said to me in a quiet voice, "Man, I wish someone would teach him a lesson." I wished I was 11 feet tall and could scare Ted like he scared us. I was so sick of him intimidating everyone. How we pretty much had to keep it tight-lipped if we wanted to keep our dignity. It would take a gorilla to get the best of Ted, or at least some sort of wild animal. I imagined a rhino charging down the hall and knocking Ted down as I watched him lumber away. After school, I played soccer with Mito and a couple of the other guys before going home and trying to figure out what I was going to bring to history class. I looked around my room until my eyes fell on the gold watch resting on the shelf above my bed. My grandfather gave me his wristwatch just before he died, and I never moved it from its spot on the shelf. It was gold with a metal band that stretched a little when you pulled it over your wrist. I held it in my palm and remembered my grandfather. He always smelled like pipe tobacco, and he told stories about being a soldier in Vietnam. As I held the watch, I started to feel how much I missed him. I jotted down a couple of war stories he had told me and set the watch gently down on my desk. In the hallway, before history class, Mito took a black case out of his locker. "Wow," I said. "Your mom let you bring the violin? No sweater?" Mito laughed. "What did you bring?" I pulled the watch out of my pocket to show my toe. What happened next was like watching something in slow motion. Out of nowhere, a giant finger hooked through the band of the watch and yanked upwards. My grip tightened as I turned to face Ted. I was looking up into his face, grinning, when I felt the watch give. Small pings of the snapped metal that hit the floor sounded miles below me. Ted was laughing. I can't explain what happened to me at that point. It was like there were flames burning in my face. My mind went blank. I let out some kind of animal growl and charged at Ted. He fell backward into his locker. I pushed him again and he fell onto the floor. Every step forward I took, I felt stronger. Whether it was in the hallway or just in my head, I heard the ringing of a bell like a boxing match. I started kicking Ted, kicking him over and over. It must have only been a few seconds before I felt hands under my armpits, pulling me away from the whimpering ogre on the floor. All I could hear was a ringing in my ears as Ted pulled himself up and ran down the hall. I was breathing heavily as I gathered the pieces of the broken watch band. The hall was completely silent, except for the careful closing of lockers. When I got home, my mom was just hanging up the phone. "That was your principal," she said. "Teddy's mother called the police." "Honey, what happened?" So there's a story of how a normal guy, a good kid it sounds like, let himself get turned into a bully. I mean, it's one thing to stand up for yourself and to say you can't do that to me. And it's another thing to beat somebody because they have harassed you and maybe hurt you before. When I was in high school, there was a girl who was very, very angry, and she was part of a gang. I won't say which gang, because it's a dangerous gang that still exists in many cities, and this is one of them. And she wore her bandana to school, and she got very angry at me one day, and I told her that I was not afraid of her. And she saw me coming out of my classroom, and she grabbed me by the hair, and she pulled me around, and she looked at me and said, I don't even remember what she said. And I just kind of stood there and looked at her. And when the assistant principal, Mr. Bailey, came and other people came, I said, I want to press charges. And as a result, I ended up going to court, and it turned out that she was pregnant, and so she got parenting classes, and she got the help that she needed. And I just told the judge that I wanted her to get the help that she needed. And she didn't come back to our school anymore because there was somewhere better for her to go to get the help that she needed. I asked the judge not to send her to prison, but instead to make sure that she got those parenting classes. So it ended up being an example of a good thing. I never found out what happened to her, but I definitely think that what happened there was much better than what would have happened if I would have fought her. And I am a very strong person, and I could have won that fight, but you know, I could have lost it just as easily, and that's not the point, because it would have continued. The violence would have escalated, and then I would have been involved in something really, really horrible, and I could have been the one who had the police called on me. So that's just not good.